Hello, my name is Bryan Sitch and I'm Curator of Archaeology here at Manchester Museum.
Oh, cool.
Part of my work is to look after the archaeological collections and the numismatic collections, and I also help to manage the team of curators here who look after the collections.
Right, what was that word you just said, Brian?
Which one?
News, I can't even say.
Numismatics?
Yeah.
That means coins and medals.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to do that again and say coins
No.
and medals?
Just keep going. Right. Everybody's used to the way I do an interview. Right. So tell us what you did, Brian, because right, you know that I'm going to ask you 4 questions.
The Reno project.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in my capacity as Curator of Archaeology, I receive many inquiries about people who are digging in Manchester or Greater Manchester, and they often want to make provision for the objects that come from their archaeological excavations. So Linda Brogan approached me about 18 months ago to talk about the possibility of taking objects from the Reno nightclub. And at this time, I'm ashamed to say, I really wasn't aware of the nightclub, perhaps only vaguely, because I don't come from Manchester. And Linda introduced this project. I thought that is really interesting, because this is somewhere in the community where people from different communities have come together and they've spent their leisure time together. And what was really interesting, I think what made it incredibly interesting for Manchester Museum was the fact that many of these people who came from mixed race relationships, marriages and so on, they were treated with considerable prejudice. And why the Manchester Museum was interested in this was because it's part of the aim of Manchester Museum to help promote understanding between different cultures and also to work towards a sustainable world. So I thought that this was a really interesting project, and we should try and support it if we could. And the then director, Nicholas Merriman, who's now gone to the Horniman Museum, he too was very supportive, and so we started our conversations there, and it was something of a revelation to me, because the kind of nightclub that Linda was drawing for me in my imagination was not just a place where you might go and enjoy something on a Friday and Saturday night. It might be a place where you went with a fair degree of trepidation. And Linda told me about people, for instance, went to the gents' toilets and came out without their clothes. They somehow lost their wallets. And I think the word we used at the time was that this was an edgy sort of place.
Yeah.
It certainly was one of the leisure focus for that community, and a community of people who really didn't have that many opportunities, that many outlets, because of the prejudice with which they were viewed by other people in society. And so having this place, this nightclub, was somewhere where that they could feel they belonged, that they owned, that they could call their own. And Linda told me lots of stories about I think it was the King and the Queen, and holding court, and you could really only sit at certain tables if you were part of that quite select group, and otherwise you had to sit on tables on the floor. And so when the Reno nightclub was excavated some months ago, it was really interesting to see, for instance, remains of the tiles and the lino and other things that Linda had described in quite a lot of detail for me. All of this is in living memory.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found very gratifying was that this wasn't some place that was dim and distant and forgotten. This was something that people held very dear in their hearts, and that they have very warm memories, despite it being a quite edgy place. They have very warm memories of the Reno nightclub. And so Linda told me about how people were getting in touch from all over the world to say, yeah, what a fantastic project this is. And to me, this more than justified the project, because it was helping to promote social care and social understanding. And clearly, people are much more tolerant now than they were, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And times, things have changed for the better, thank heavens. But at that time, this was one of the few places where people could go. And the museum clearly has an interest in documenting these places to capture a record that we can then pass on to posterity. So not only the objects, but the historical information about the Reno and how people related to it.
That's fabulous. How did it, you know, when you was on the excavation site itself, right? Because I've told you loads of stories about these people and you're now surrounded by them. How did that feel?
Being surrounded by people who went to the Reno wasn't, I didn't find it threatening. I was intrigued.
Yeah.
Obviously time moves on.
Yeah.
I think what I saw when I visited the club was lots of conversations going on, and pretty much everybody knew everybody else, and people were popping in just to see what the latest discoveries were. And I think the day I was there, I was shown was it a pair of flared jeans?
A pair of bottle green flares
that had turned up, and also things to do with the record player, the disc jockeys, equipment, the turntable, something that supported the records. Of course, there's people, very many young people today would be completely mystified about the workings of one of the old-fashioned record players, and why you would need a turntable would be quite a mystery to them. So in a way, capturing this information and recording these finds is as interesting a bit of history, say, as a bowl from Rome, Manchester might be. Nowhere near as old, but this is interesting information that we'll pass on to future generations. I think that's a very important part of the role of the museum, but equally bringing people together and encouraging them to discuss with one another how people related to one another, within living memory when there was a lack of tolerance between people from different ethnic communities. Now, I'm not saying it's ideal, but it seems to me that people are more tolerant, which is obviously a great thing.
What did you learn?
I learned a lot more about the history of the Reno nightclub, which was an unknown nightclub to me. The kind of place, perhaps had I been brought up in Manchester, I might have gone as a young man and some of my colleagues, had quite clear memories of it from working at the museum, and they say, oh yes, so somewhere we used to go back in the day, and I think the realisation for me that archaeology, as we've been saying, isn't just something that's thousands of years ago. It can be something that is relatively recent. So the excavation of the nightclub, to me, brought up memories of excavations in the United States where people have excavated, say, a 1970s rubbish dump.
Oh, right.
And they've collected things like the ring pulls from beer cans. I mean, nowadays the ring pull is actually integral to the can. It's part of the can itself, and the reason that's been done is that people got sick and fed up of finding beer can ring pulls on every street lining the pavement. So they've done it so that these things don't detach. They will go back with the can to be recycled. But in the 1970s, archaeologists were excavating sites such as, and sites that you wouldn't really expect to be regarded as archaeological sites normally. The American archaeologists were excavating rubbish dumps, and they were collecting ring pulls and black plastic bags, and they were creating typologies of these that would inform their study, their understanding of the remains of the past. So there's no difference in a sense between a Roman site, a mid to later 20th century site, or for instance, a rubbish dump site in the States, dating from the 1970s.
I've got to jump in here and say
Do you want me to stop that?
No, it's all right. That you did far more than just listening to a story there, because you was absolutely integral in me being able to work out how to go forward. Go on, all right.
Being integral.
Yeah, so because I arrived in your office, right, and with 1,000 post-it notes, right, and I didn't know what order it went in. And you listened for hours on end while I ordered them, and your questions, that made me able to do the project. Does that make sense to you?
I don't think it was hours and ends like that.
It was three sessions of at least 2 hours.
I think it was a couple of hours.
Yeah. 3 sessions of 2 hours where you really listened.
But I think that's an important role for the museum, because very often people who work in museums are, they're perceived as being experts, and they look down on other people, or they're a bit frosty. And actually, we're not. We're just like any other people. We're interested in what's going on. We do have experience of working with these collections. We perhaps know a bit more about the collections themselves, the history of the collections, than other people. And this is something that we really want to share with the public. It's not something that the collection is not just for the curators. They're there for the entire community. So if someone comes forward and says, I've got this idea for a project, and can you share what you know about how to go about doing this, then obviously we will try very hard to help that support and offer support and facilitate that project, particularly one that sorry, I was getting a frog in my throat. We as curators will try very hard to facilitate that project.
But that's good to know, Brian. I think this video is really important because we don't know stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? There's such a huge divide between our world and your world that we just do think that it's all about you, and you are just stuck up. And do you know what I mean? So that was a real fabulous journey for me to just see that you are just a person. And do you know what I mean? Not you, the institution. Yeah.
I think it's a sad aspect of modern life that very often people's roles are very complex, or can be quite difficult to understand. If you haven't spent time working in that kind of environment. Yes, we have our own way of going about doing things that prioritises the long-term care of the collections, but that doesn't mean to say that we don't want them to be used and appreciated by members of the public. And we're only too delighted when people come forward and say, I would like to know more about this, or can you give your advice about this particular project? And if we can help by supporting that, then we will.
Well, you've very much helped me.
Well, it's a great pleasure.
Yeah. The next question is, what did you think worked?
I think that there was huge community buy-in. Actually, a hell of a lot more than perhaps you might have expected looking back, when this place was perhaps thought or considered by the wider community as being, dare I say, a bit of a dive, or a haunt of perdition. Is that the right kind of word to use?
I doubt if we'd even know what that meant. Go on. Yeah.
Sort of one of these rather edgy places where you lose your wallet in the gentleman's toilet. So sorry, I forgot the question now.
What did you learn? And you started off about, I can't remember myself now, about the buy-in from the community.
Yeah, so you've got this tremendous buy-in from the community, and I think that shows us that the museum works on many projects. Many of them involve the community, or they have the potential to involve the community. It showed if the evidence was wanting, and I don't think it was, but it showed that in order for a project to be really, really successful, it helps enormously if you've got the buy-in, the support of the general community. And if you're doing something that doesn't have that level of support, you need to make sure that you're trying to engage the public in such a way that they will give it their support. And all sorts of things became possible. People And I think it's very much the way that museum work is going now, that it's moving very much away from a book on the wall, the curator is a kind of connoisseur who shares his or her personal expertise in a particular area. It's moving away from that, and it's moving towards a recognition of a shared understanding, a shared knowledge, shared expertise, where members of the public have personal stories and testimonies that they can offer that will actually make these projects even more beneficial, even more rich, even more rewarding. And I think that's all to the good, that we need that sense of a common ownership of some of these projects.
How would you, this sounds so vain, this question, but it's a true question. How would you, the reason that the Reno works is because I'm the bridge, aren't I? Do you know what I mean? Like, how, if you was going to do like another project, how would you make that work? How do you get to contact the community in that without, there needs to be a me in each of these projects, doesn't there? There needs to be an artist with that.
There are different ways of doing it,
Yeah.
and one particularly successful way has been through, for example, working with an artist who will engage with members of the community, bring them together to work on a particular project, perhaps a creative and artistic project, and then that work is presented in the museum, or perhaps it's an art gallery, but perhaps it's another work of art that's ultimately collected by the museum or art gallery. And so our artists can fulfill that kind of hinging role. Alternatively, there are people in museums who work in outreach and they have particular skills in engaging communities. And one thing I've found on some of the projects I've worked on more recently is that, yes, people working in museums can do this work, but it probably takes a bit longer because it takes the curator time to develop those contacts, not only develop contacts, but to develop friendships, to gain trust.
Yes.
And these working relationships should not be taken for granted. There's something, they have to be worked out. They have to be refreshed on occasion, and to keep everybody feeling that yes, there is something. Yes, the museum's gaining, but yes, the community, the members of the community are gaining by it. And through that common working relationship, we create something special, something rich, something creative and imaginative, innovative, that will really appeal to all the visitors who come to the museum.
I still got a question beyond that one, inside of that one, because I swear like a trooper, and I have a way of talking and a way of being within the community because it's my community. How would you address that though? Say like you was in Moston. I don't know anything about Moston. I would find that difficult. The project in loads of ways was quite easy because they're my friends and they go back all my life and I have a passion for it. How do you put them things into, do you know what I'm saying?
Their personal lived experiences.
Yeah, you know, like that made the reason that loads of people are coming to the thing, it's not just because they love me, but I know somebody who then knows somebody who then knows somebody, and they come for that. And because when we're on site, we're effing and blinding, they're smoking weed, they're doing whatever they're doing, do you know, which makes everybody feel comfortable. So how,
Well, we all carry with us the baggage of our bringing up, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you've been brought up in an environment where people swear, that's what you're accustomed to. But it doesn't mean to say that you're less intelligent than someone who's been brought up in an environment where that wasn't easily readily acceptable. And if you mix people from those different environments, I suppose there might be a degree of tension. But one of the great things about these community projects is that you in coming to know one another, you come to appreciate one another's very different viewpoints, and you come to accept, okay, they're not diametrically opposed to my own. They may be slightly different, and they may be voiced in shall we say, a coarser level of language than what somebody may be accustomed to. But it doesn't mean to say that they're wrong or they're bad or that they are your enemy. It's just a different way of doing things, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about understanding the differences that make us so different, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have this, that famous speech by JFK, about we all breathe the same air, and it's still true that we share so much in common. The relatively little things like swearing. I mean, there are ways and means of responding to this, and sometimes you hear people respond to swear words by making it into a kind of joke. So saying things like let's give the sailor talk, the old heave ho, shall we? But there are ways and means. So and if that's how people talk, that's how people talk.
Yeah, it's quite natural to me though. I just swear, and so it's the other way around though as well. What I found was when we was on the dig as well, that we got friendly with lots of people that we wouldn't have thought we got friendly with. Like I call her Posh Margaret Wells. She volunteers in the museum quite a lot as well. And we're proper friends now. Yeah, do you know what I mean? So we've got to get used to you just as much as you've got to get used to us.
But everybody benefits.
Yeah. No, definitely. It was a proper community. There was the Reno community, but then I've just walked past it coming up, and it's so sad that it was a real living, working community for those 3 weeks of all of us who were there.
Yeah, there is, I think it's very much a symptom of life in the early 21st century that we used to change, but it seems that the pace of change it's accelerated, and that we can have very fond memories. We can cherish memories of a particular place where we grew up, where we spent our teenage years, where we did our courting and so on. And years later, you think back on that. You might revisit the site and realise that this place where you absolutely look forward to going there on a Friday and Saturday night to see all your friends and have a great time. It's not there anymore. It's a wasteland, or it's some grassland. Yeah. And you think actually there were people there and all the vibrancy, the life, the energy that was there, and now it's gone. But that's something that we can capture through the work of the museum, through the work that you've been doing, Linda, by recording, by sharing those interviews, by making that available. So the heart of the community that the Reno represented has gone, but instead you have something like a virtual heart of the Reno community that people can visit, not just for a few years to come, but hopefully for many, many years. Yeah. And perhaps, who knows, there'll be archaeologists in the year 3000 who look back on this interview and they will say, do you know, that's just like, it's not so different, is it? We look at Romans as being thousands of years ago, but now here's the Reno, and that's 1,000 years ago in our time. And the Reno is almost like ancient Rome all over again, but more recent. So
no, it would be though, wouldn't it? It would be. We buried a thing, in the heart of it before we closed it back up. A time capsule with all the memoirs on.
Yeah, good. So if somebody re-excavates, then they'll
all the films will be there. Everybody's testimony and date, clips from each day.
And the great thing, of course, is that we're dealing not with great and good, so you're not talking about captains of industry or the mayor of the city or councillors. We're talking just like ordinary people going about their lives, doing what ordinary people do. And so often archaeology has been obsessed with excavating high status sites like temples or things that are really big and visible, and the ordinary people don't often get to look in. And yet, when you explore the small detail of their lives, you find a really engaging picture that emerges. So, for instance, finding out about visiting Reno in the 70s, 80s, might be comparable to understanding what the audience did sitting in a Roman amphitheatre, watching games. These things they're to do with leisure. We're talking about the archaeology of leisure, aren't we? Yeah. So to me, the fact that it's perhaps only a generation or two ago, it's still as interesting in its own right as something that is much, much older. And I think as time goes by, it'll become even more interesting for people in the future as the generation that knew the Reno slowly die off.
Yeah.
You know, it will only be accessible as a kind of virtual. It won't be within living memory anymore. It will be a virtual memory that people explore through books, through reports, through films, through interviews, and so on.
Wow, Bryan. No, that's really true. It's made me feel dead sad and dead happy at the same time. You know, happy that we did it, but wow.
Well, it's kind of, does it confer a kind of immortality on that community? And I think that's a kind of quite a nice way to look upon it, because when you think that the community, when it started off, I know you refer to it as, you refer to people from, well, it's polite for people in museums to refer to mixed race, and I know you prefer the term half-caste.
Not that I prefer it. I think I'm just being a bit naughty when I say it as well. Sometimes I know myself as that. That was what I was when I was a kid. Go on. What would you say?
So people have been brought up in that at that particular time, when, as you told me, you know, if a child had dark skin, you know, and was in a pram pushed by a white mother, then people would get very angry and, you know, even spit at the mother and the child in the street, and it's appalling.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a level of human tolerance, I think, that, you know, it's what makes us human. You know, why behave so atrociously? So when you think that a community like that half-caste or mixed-race community started off in life with so few chances, and you yourself have spoken to me about how little academic expectations, how low that academic bar was, that there were very few expectations for people in that community to go on, you know, to high school, let alone university. You know, that there were government reports saying, you know, we shouldn't expect very much, you know, shouldn't expect these children to go very far in their education.
Wow. Purely
because of the colour of their skin. And clearly that's not the case. With the right kind of support and tuition and so on, you know, anyone from any community can go as far as that, provided they're willing to work as well. Then, you know, everybody should have those chances, those opportunities in life.
Wow.
So I think, you know, it's a nice thing to think that mixed race community that started off with so few of the opportunities that other communities enjoyed. Here they are, they've been preserved, and in a way that will go forward into the future. People will look back on this in times to come, and they'll be absolutely fascinated.
No, they will, won't they? No, they will. Go on then, what do you think didn't work?
It's difficult to say. I think one of the challenges for us as a museum with finite storage space and facilities is that as much as we would like, we simply cannot keep everything because we just don't have the space. And so it's a kind of balancing act between what you keep and what you dispose of. And clearly with material that's relatively recent, if you have a great many, for instance, empty bottles, which of those do you want to keep? Do you want to keep all of them, or just a few of them? Do you take a representative sample, for instance? Would you weed out the broken bottles? And I think one of the great challenges is always, okay, what is important? What are the stories? What are the objects that really tell the most interesting, important stories? And I think maybe through the post-excavation work, some of those stories will emerge. Yeah. But it's always sad for me to think that people spend a lot of time excavating stuff, and then the museum will only take a small portion of that. But that is how we have to work, because, you know, we cannot easily find money to extend the museum store as much as we would like. So sadly, some of that material, you know, is disposed of on site, and that, you know, we have to make those very, very rational collections management decisions that, you know, people might find hard to understand.
No, it's a good thing about editing. I've already done it to a certain degree. Do you know what I mean? Because at first I was just really emotionally attached to everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, But then, like, no broken bottles when, and you know, like different things. And I've edited it down to certain things.
Light fittings, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's made me that as a museum, Manchester Museum, it does take a more historical approach simply by virtue of the nature of its collections and when they were collected. So collecting from a very modern site makes it challenging for us. And so we have to think carefully, what do we accept and what do we not accept? So I think we agreed to take the clothing, flared jeans, and we're taking those, but we do not have in-house textiles expertise. So we work very closely with colleagues at the Whitworth Art Gallery, where there are curators with those sorts of experience and expertise who can help us to preserve that piece of clothing, but as a kind of very iconic piece of clothing from what 70s, 80s, it was very important, I think.
And there's a few bottles you agreed with, didn't you? Like the champagne bottle. Yeah. I've got a few that I'm going to fight for. Yeah. That you wouldn't understand the significance, like a tip-top bottle, which was our pop. Do you know, like Mr. Singh's and things like that in Moss Side, we all drank tip-top. So to us, that is significant.
Yeah. And some of these things, they have to be in negotiation.
Yeah,
and you know the stories. Now, this is what I mean by the shared experience and expertise that we respectively bring to community projects. Yeah. So the curator from the outside looking in may find it, okay, what's the significance of this particular object, this tip-top bottle, whatever, why, if you can tell me why it's so important, then the museum, will take that object. But sometimes it's not always easy to understand what the justification is.
No, that's got a definite justification, and it's like the way, probably as people watching this video will get it as well, and it sort of sang the minute I seen it. It was like, oh my God, a tip-top. I thought I hadn't seen it before, and it definitely, and it brought back flooding of the look of the street, buying warm peanuts, red and white mint sweets. Do you know, like the ice cream van playing Kit Kat? Do you know, like. Yeah, and I think they're particular to kind of Moss Side and that type of area.
I think that's one of the most exciting things about museum collections, in that tangible contact with the past, and certainly the recent past has that ability to evoke floods of memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
For someone who's perhaps familiar with that object from, say, seeing it in their grandparents' house, or perhaps they saw it when they, when they were teenagers. The popular culture material. It could be to do with records, time, discs, and so on, and or the plastic bag, the name of a record shop.
Spinning,
I think
that nearly killed Dave.
And it closed down and disappeared many years ago.
Yeah. But do you know what's great about that one, Brian? The guy who owned the shop confirmed that was the 1976 design. Yeah. So he got in touch, as well. I think
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And in a way, it kind of reminds me of what we were saying earlier about the American rubbish dump excavations that people were creating, these typologies of ring pulls, and that was helping to date the different layers in the rubbish. And here you have someone in the community who's come forward. If you have a bag like that, I can confirm that bag, was only used in 1976 or whatever. And so you have a date for the piece of ground, the layer on the site that you're excavating. And it's, sometimes there are people in the community who have that really important bit of information that you need for it all to make sense, for it to, they provide the context, the understanding. Otherwise, it's just a plastic bag. But that bit of information can be really
But
crucial.
Everybody who went in the Reno would have known that plastic bag. Do you know, because everybody bought records. Do you know what happened though? For ages, Brian, at the beginning, nobody could work out where anything was. Nobody had a sense of direction once we started going in. And it's like, that's weird how your memory lies. Do you know, it was all going, no, but the gambling room was definitely that. No, there was argument after argument, about where everything was. And what was throwing us was the brown cladding that was on the Reno had gone, it had rotted. So it was all these white tiles that nobody recognised. And then we found a bit of the cladding, and then we went, oh, of course.
It's something that I think happens with memory, that it is not, yes, it can fade, but it can be subtly changed by the years. And I remember in a previous job, we had the remains of a medieval abbey just outside Leeds, and there were people in the community who would say, "Oh, there's been terrible vandalism and loss of stone because I remember this arch when it was still standing." And I did a bit of research in the local library, and I found some images in newspapers, first the 1950s and then 1900s and a bit. And I found out that within the last 150 years, that arch had not been standing.
Right.
It had always been in ruins.
Right.
And I jokingly said that either these people's memories were playing tricks on them, or perhaps they were a little bit older than they were letting on.
No, that's a big thing to remember, that if it wasn't there though. But we was like that, honestly. At one point, we said, we did it in the right place, but no, we did come to this corner.
Because I think had the main road been extended, had it been
the pavement.
The pavement.
What it was is, so.
So like you had a very partial.
Yeah, we
exposure.
lost about a third of it on the front and on the side. So we couldn't get to where the DJ would be and the dance floor proper, and we couldn't get to the stairs, because they were now trapped under the pavements on both ways. And like you said, the road had been widened.
It can be very disorienting, You just need to get your boundaries sorted out.
Yeah. So you mentioned, go on, is there anything else you want to say that didn't work? Because this is supposed to be an evaluation and everyone just keeps saying wonderful things.
It's difficult for me to be critical. I mean, I suppose if you push me, I might say that I enjoyed going to the exhibition. I enjoyed seeing the film of the dig being projected onto the outside of the Whitworth Art Gallery. There were display cases with a selection of objects from the dig, which meant a lot to the people who dug them up. Maybe less so to general visitors, to whom they might just have looked like a pot bottle from the 1980s. They might have thought, actually, why are they showing this? I don't know. But I mean, that's one of the strengths of the exhibition, that people really do get it, if they've been involved. And maybe with a different kind of approach, with perhaps more formal design. That might have made it a bit easier for people who hadn't had the benefit of participating in the community project. Perhaps that would have just raised the profile of those objects a little bit more, so that they were not so much seen as just objects of everyday use, and more into desirable objects akin to a Roman statue or an ancient Greek pot or something. And maybe that will happen, in years to come, that people will take more of a kind of art historical approach to this material. But I'm not knocking it at all, because actually one of the great benefits of these things is that they can be very homespun and still be of intense interest to people in the community, because it's so important to them to see material that they have dug up themselves on display to the general public. It says this is not just something that you throw in the rubbish bins. It's actually something that people out there, they really understand. They cherish it in their memories. And it's that is what we want to capture, and to retain that and share it with people in years to come.
Yeah, it worked on two levels for me. I totally get what you're saying, but it worked on a few levels actually. Is that if you put anything under a museum case, people look at it. I thought that was quite funny. Like a bit like, and just that something that belonged to us was under a museum case, and I thought that was amazing. So. But I get what you're saying. You could make it slightly more Romanesque or something. Like you said.
Well, to take a more formal kind of design approach to it, and so instead of it being a case with some bottles from the excavation, maybe you explore a different way of doing that. Perhaps it's to do with imagination and art, an artistry and by putting things in cases, you actually imprison them. And what you need to do is kind of explore ways that set them free, that in imaginative and innovative ways, and then people come and say, "Did you see all those bottles?" Okay, they're ready from the 90s, but didn't they look at, the way they'd lit them or the way they'd arranged them? Didn't that look fantastic? I never thought about glass bottles in that way before.
We have to talk again then, Brian. For your design, because we're going to the Whitworth, you know that, don't you?
For a celebration.
We're going to do a residency there. Well, providing we get the dough. But yeah, we're going to do, and that's where we'll do everything that you're talking about. We're going to further excavate our excavation and more stories and display them differently and do something with our footage and our photographs and everything.
That's fantastic. I look forward to that.
Yeah. Are we done?
I've no more to say unless you've got questions.
Yeah, I think we're done.
I've answered all your questions.
No, thank you. Thank you for your help. Like I said at the beginning, without you listening, I know you don't get how important that was, but just listening and helping me move you helped me move the Post-it notes and get it in order and get my mind settled. And I don't know, that grounded me in such a huge way that then I could go to the next place I needed to go and go, I've got this. Do you know? Yeah, so...
It's nice to be appreciated, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.